Hey, Luca here. This is a new type of video that we're trying today for the first time, where I talk about a famous book that I liked. This is made possible by the fact that in the refactoring community we have a book club, where every 2 months we decide on a non-fiction book to read and we review it together in a live event at the end of the period. So a while ago we read Atomic Habits by James Clear, which I chose to start doing this on YouTube as well, because it's just one of my favorite books and has been so useful to me both in life and work. So let's start. Because personally, I'm a creature of habit. As I've written many times in the past, I schedule tasks on my calendar, create recurring slots for ceremonies, all kind of things. And I think about most of the things that I do as routines, okay? So as such, even before reading the book, I was already a fan of James Clear. I have been following him on social media for many years, and I'm even subscribed to his newsletter. And this is a double-edged sword, of course, because as I approached the book, Atomic Habits, I suspected I would be already familiar with most of its ideas. But it turns out I was wrong, and I completely loved it. So the book not only elaborates on James' most popular ideas, but it also presents them in a coherent full package that turns them from simple insights to a full framework. So I learned new things and I also understood better what I thought of knowing. So here's what we will cover today. First, we will talk about why habits matter, and it's about identity and systems. Then we will discuss what James calls the 3 layers of change, a handy mental model to think about progress. Then we will move to the 4 stages of habits, which is the meat of the book, and we will talk about how to manipulate them to your advantage. And finally, I will give you my final take on all these ideas and the book itself. So let's start with the why. We often think that habits are a means to progress, a means towards a goal. If I had to isolate now only one teaching from the whole book, instead, it's that habits are the progress. Habits are the goal. And this shift of perspective is based on 2 fundamental ideas: that habits compound and that systems are more important than goals. So let's start with habits compound. When you look at big stories in tech, sports, investing and more, it's actually very rare to find true overnight successes. Because when you look closely, you find that success stories are usually rather the result of producing decent performance for an inordinate amount of time, rather than extraordinary one-off feats. Most people I know, in fact, are disciplined and willing to think long-term. And in a world where skills only get cheaper, also because of AI, this mindset, this being stubborn, might be the only true edge that we have left. So the more modern culture pushes us towards instant gratification, the more the ability to plan and execute on a year's scale gets scarce and valuable. At least that's how I think. So good habits compound over time, like the famous plus 1% every day. And the second idea stems pretty much from the first and debunks the common way people try to make progress, that is, by setting end goals. So James Clear says, goals have 3 problems. The first one, they are temporary. What happens when the goal is achieved? Goals are about winning, but once you win, there might be nothing left to do, or so you think. The second problem is that they are just aspirational. They don't tell you how to get there. That's what you need systems for. And the third is that they delay happiness. Sacrificing something today to get something tomorrow is often a smart play, but there's a catch. Because it is risky to do something you don't like for a long time just because of some ideal reward at the end. Because the outcome you wish for might either never materialize or not be as good as you expected. So wait a minute. Didn't we say it was good to plan long term? Of course it is, but to get far, you need also to enjoy the journey. And when you do, you will find that you may not need a specific destination anymore. So there is a great quote in the book that says, people don't rise to the level of their goals, they fall to the level of their systems, which to me looks similar to Play games you enjoy playing rather than only winning, which I wrote in a previous edition of Refactoring, which I'm linking below. Also, as an example, rather than thinking that you should lose weight and focus on the target weight, think about what it means to be a healthy, active person. What does this version of you look like? What do they do every day? So visualize this person and their life and make it happen with habits, not with goals. So that's what James Clear wants you to do rather than setting your target weight. Still worth saying that goals do have their place. When you set to go in some direction, you need measures, you need KPIs to check that you're in track. You can place like stepping stones along the way, but know that goals only mark progress, they don't make it. So that said, let's talk about the 3 layers of change. So if all this conversation feels still a bit nebulous, think about change as made of 3 layers: identity, processes, and outcomes. Identity is what we discussed before in the example. It's the person you want to become. It's the improved version of you that you look forward to, which unlocks the why you're doing this. Then processes are the systems or habits to bring you closer to your improved identity, to make the outcomes happen. And finally, the outcomes themselves are the specific things that you want to achieve. You can only work in combination with the other 2. So it's identity, which enables processes, which in turn enable outcomes. So James Clear argues that habits should be mostly identity-based rather than outcome-based. What does it mean? Outcome-based habits tend to be weak and temporary, while identity is what you need to truly play infinite games and make things stick. I have found the focus on identity and all this depiction of systems versus goals to be very strong ideas, to be honest. When I read through them, I was able to reflect on my failed habits through new lenses, and I learned more about myself. So those ideas also set the stage effectively for the second part of the book, which deconstructs how habits work and teaches how to turn this to your advantage through the 4 stages of habits, which are the cue, the craving, the response, and the reward. So the cue is the trigger that makes the brain recognize an opportunity for reward. Then you have the craving, which is the desire to achieve this reward, and it occurs once the craving indicates the opportunity. Next, you have the response, which is the action you take to get the reward, and finally, the reward itself, which is the resulting benefit from the response. Now, for a habit to stick, you need all 4. And you can also organize these stages into distinct phases: the problem one and the solution one. So to create the problem effectively, you need to work on cue and craving, while to create the solution, you need to work on response and reward. So the key to building good habits is to act on all these stages. For the cue, to make it obvious. For the craving, to make it attractive. For the response, to make it easier and easier to do. And finally, the reward needs to be satisfying, of course. Likewise, if you want to break bad habits, so the opposite, you do the reverse. For cues, you make them invisible. For cravings, you make them unattractive. You don't want that. The response, you make it difficult. And what about the reward? You guessed it, you make it not satisfying. But how do you do that? James unpacks this into individual laws. So let's go one by one, starting with how to make the cue obvious. Now, one of the reasons why you may not engage in a habit is that it's unclear when you should do that. And the strongest cues are about time and space. Time is meaning you do things always at the same time. And space is things you do whenever you get to some place. To set strong time cues, you can schedule your habits on your calendar and respect the schedule. And for strong space cues instead, you may manipulate your environment so that you are reminded of doing something whenever you get to the design place. For example, you can put a book on your cushion to remind you to read before going to bed. Another strategy for creating better cues is to stack habits together. For example, it would be hard to floss randomly throughout the day, while it's easier if you always do it right after you brush your teeth. Next, let's talk about craving and making it attractive. Because another reason why your habits may not stick is that performing them does not look good enough. And for improving this, here are my two favorite strategies from the book. The first one is to get influenced. The author argues that we are influenced by other people, mainly three main groups. The close ones, who are our family and friends, the many, so-called the majority, and the powerful, that are the rich, the successful people we want to become. So it's easier for a habit to become attractive when it's performed by people we are influenced by. And while we don't have full control over this, we can still strive to surround ourselves of people who engage in the habits we would like to adopt. So if you want to start writing online regularly, you may join a small mastermind of people who are doing just the same. And if you want to stop drinking, hang out with people who don't drink, and stop hanging with those who drink too much. And the second way to make things more attractive is to bundle the temptations together. That's a great strategy. You bundle something unpleasant with something pleasant. For example, you may put your spinning bike in front of the TV, so you can watch Netflix while you bike. And to go a step further, you may even only allow yourself to watch some show while you bike. I love that. The third step now is the response, and you have to make it easier, we have said. You may fall out of your habits just because they're too hard to perform, right? So here are strategies to make them easier. The first one is repetition. Just repetition. Part of the hardship is always psychological. For that, sticking with the habit for some time is often enough just to make it easier. And about this, I always think of the awesome season finale of BoJack when he was running, right? And he meets another runner and he's tired, he's without breath. And the other runners tells him that it gets easier. Every day it gets a little easier, but you got to do it every day. That's the hard part, but it does get easier. The second way is to remove friction. Any activity always includes some kind of friction that is not related to the activity itself. Like to work out at the gym, you have to first change clothes and drive to the gym. Or to eat healthy, you need to spend time prepping your meals. The more you can reduce such friction, the higher the chances that you will keep performing the habit. Which, in other words, means for anything you want to do, you should find the path of least resistance. For me, one of the tactics that work best is setting dedicated environments that are as turnkey as possible. For example, I've always struggled at going to the gym, I admit, so I have set up a small one at our place. We are lucky, of course, to have a spare room we can use, so we bought some equipment and a hard rubber floor. We also keep the gym clothes there, so basically everything gym happens in the room. So friction becomes basically zero, and both my wife and myself are now working out more than we ever did. And I also find that, contrary to common sense, sometimes it helps to kickstart a habit by buying nice stuff. We didn't need the good rubber floor to start working out or a big mirror, but we bought them anyway. Because now the room truly looks like a gym. It feels professional, which has had, I would say, an impact on our identities. We feel like people who train at home and are serious about it. So honestly, I used to poke fun at folks who start side projects by buying the domain name, right? Well, not anymore. These things matter. They can change the perception you have about that activity and also about yourself. And the third piece of advice is to start ridiculously small. Another great insight in the book is that there is no such a thing as starting too small. If you struggle at doing anything, make it smaller. Even really ridiculously so. What matters is that you commit psychologically to it. So you can turn I will read more into I will read just 1 page per day. You can turn I will walk for 20 minutes into I will just put on my walking shoes and that's it, not even leave the house. James Clear calls this the 2 minutes rule. Commit to 2 minutes of work. And you can also flip it. make it hard not to do it, which is a great dual strategy. For this, one of the things that work best, for me at least, is public commitment. When I want to do something challenging and I'm not sure I will follow through, I just tell everyone. So I'm telling you this story. I'm an amateur sim racer, and a few weeks ago I decided to join an official super competitive league on iRacing, which is the simulator that I use. There was a good chance that I would eventually back out because I needed a lot of prep. I had never raced, neither with that car or that track, and it would be the longest race I ever did, like 90 minutes. I was unsure about managing fuel and many other things that you have to prep for the race. Also, there was a good chance I would do everything right and still arrive like comically last. So what I did is I told everybody about it. My wife, my parents, my friends. I gave them the link to the streaming and I even posted that on X and LinkedIn. Eventually, the race went kind of fine and I even got my moment of glory on video, which I posted to everyone, and everything was fine. So let's talk about reward now, which is the final step, because we said make it satisfying. The problem with good habits is that oftentimes the reward is long term, while the inconvenience is now. Conversely, the reward for bad habits is now and the damage is long term. Think about that. So if you can't really turn unpleasurable things into pleasurable, you can at least treat yourself with something else whenever you do them. For example, whenever you manage to get up early, you can get yourself a nice breakfast that you look forward to. Or whenever you complete all the tasks that you planned for the morning, you can have a comfortable longer lunch break. So let's get to the bottom line, because Atomic Habits is just a great book. Even if you believe you already know a lot about yourself, routines, motivations, and more like myself, you likely find something to learn there. Or at the very least, it will help you put the pieces of the puzzle together. So while I was reading the book, I constantly thought about my failed habits. And I often found a deeper explanation about my failures and also ideas to make things better, many of which I'm trying these days. I also wrote down 5 super simple questions that I ask myself whenever I want to put a new habit in place, or I struggle with an existing one. And the questions are, the first is about identity. Who do I want to become? How does this make me a better version of myself? How do I see myself in 10 years by doing this? The second question is it obvious when I should do it or where I should do it? This is very important. And is it attractive to do it enough? Is it easy enough to do it? And is it satisfying to do it? By reviewing these 5 things, I can spot problems and where the bottleneck is if things are not going right. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and as always, thank you for watching.